Debrief by the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage. My name is Justin Terrell. I'm the Executive Director of the Council. I'm sitting in on moderating this discussion or leading off things tonight for our distinguished chair, Narita Hughes, who is under the weather. We just want to take a moment to recognize her leadership as well as the leadership of the Council. The 11 members appointed by the governor who work with staff to ensure that Minnesotans of African Heritage participate and equitably benefit from the policies and procedures of the state of Minnesota, which is an abbreviated version of our mission. And I'll just we have a packed agenda, so I'll kind of just go through this real quick. For those who don't know, the council was established in 1980. We celebrated 40 years this year. And our role primarily is advisory to the state legislature, all 201 elected members, and to the governor's office. Our job and our council's job is to represent our community at the state capitol every single day. And that's why it's important for us to have this conversation, to hear from our Black legislators on their experiences at the capitol, where they're leading, where they're pushing, and how they're fighting for our communities. And so I'm excited to welcome all 7 Black legislators tonight. Lisa Demuth is not able to join us. Representative Demuth is not able to join us because she has a conflict in her district. There's a Black Hawk that went down in her district last year, and they're doing the commemoration tonight. And so, but she submitted a statement. So we're excited to have her with us by way of written word. To give you just a quick update on the council, we are fully staffed and we have a full council of members appointed by the governor. We're still looking for those legislative members though. We started the year working on issues such as the Crown Act to end hair discrimination. We worked on the 5-year cap for probation, and we were really getting the wheels going working with lawmakers on missing and murdered African-American women. Then COVID-19 hit, and we had to pivot to ensure that the governor and lawmakers were in connection with the community, and we had stakeholder meetings with the governor and community meetings with lawmakers to make sure that the concerns, and with the departments to make sure the concerns of our community were front and center. We were able to deliver on some things, not everything. But as we all know, in the middle of COVID-19, we saw the horrendous murder of George Floyd. And our response as an agency was to advise the governor and the legislature on 3 things. 1, a prosecutor on the team that the community had faith in. 2, a civil rights investigation from the state, because the federal government has sort of ceased doing consent agreements with local police departments. And we can talk about what that means later. And then number 3 was making changes to the post board. And as the sitting executive director who's currently in transition, I'm excited to report back to the community that all 3 of those things are things that lawmakers and activists and community members worked very hard together to get done. And that we are excited to know that we were able to help deliver on those 3 things. And now tonight you get to hear from the Black legislators who have been championing these issues and many more for years now. And what they have to offer back as far as feedback to the community and how the community can support them going forward, because we need full participation from the community is essential. So I'll end my comments there. We have a packed agenda, and we'll need to make some changes to the agenda on the fly to account for folks who got to step off the call early. But right now I want to introduce Senator Hayden. So Senator Hayden is the ranking member on the Health and Human Services Committee. He is also the senator for 62, Senate District 62, which is in South Minneapolis. That is where the George Floyd incident happened. It's also a district that has high representation of elected officials who are people of color from Park Board all the way up to the Senate seat and the Congress seat. And so we want to welcome Senator Hayden to offer. He's got to step off, and so we're going to give him 10 minutes now to address the community. Indira, is Senator Hayden with us yet?
He is trying to join right now.
Okay. Shakira, are you able to add him?
As soon as he joins, I'll promote him.
Is he on the webinar side, Shakira?
No, he's not on the attendee side.
Okay. So I know we have other members who have conflicts, and so I don't want to delay the conversation. If we could move to Jasmine. Jasmine, do you want to make your presentation real quick, and then we'll keep things moving?
Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Jasmine Carey, and I am the Legislative and Policy Director for the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage. Since we have a few legislators that have to step out early, I'm going to condense kind of the topics that I had for today. Justin hit a lot of those issues, but just wanted to talk about what the council has been working on this session. So during the beginning of our legislative session, since it was a bonding and a policy year, we had priorities in those areas. So when it came to policy, we've had 20 bills that we tracked and advocated for that were either led by legislators of African heritage, community organizations of African heritage, or bills that had a strong impact on the African heritage community in Minnesota, as well as our supplemental budget, which is the extra money that was left over in this non-budget year, where we were able to work in the beginning before COVID-19 happened to prioritize money with the Department of Human Services on child protection policy, as well as with the Department of Public Safety on a community violence task force and money to help organizations to address community violence around the state in Minnesota. In addition to that, as Justin touched on, we were able to shift when COVID-19, the global pandemic started. Before that, we had worked on several bills and had 2 hearings scheduled that week. One that was on the Crown Act that we were able to finish, and then another hearing that we had scheduled for the Missing and Murdered African American Women Task Force. We were not able to have that hearing, but that's a bill that we hope to continue working on as session, the next biennium continues. Once we shifted with COVID-19, we were able to advise the executive branch with the governor, as well as state agency, on issues and the impact on our community. And we were able to pull together a list of African heritage organizations that have been sending in recommendations to the governor's office, as well as leadership, to advocate for those, and we were able to gain support from Governor Walz. So we are going to talk about all of that today, as well as, it looks like we have a full house. Everyone is here. And just to confirm, was Senator Hayden able to join the call?
Yeah, he's on. I'm just trying to get him promoted.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Shakira. Sorry for the changing plans, everyone. So with COVID-19, we were able to get those recommendations heard and supported by the governor before by that first special session, and then going into that special session, the first one that we'll touch on later in June, where we were working on those priorities that Justin mentioned around police reform, as well as addressing the needs of the African heritage community during the impact of COVID-19, and that second special session where we continue those advances. So just not to hold everyone up, I'm gonna start with, we're just gonna start with Senator Champion, and we'll have him do a short introduction, and then we'll be able to move to Senator Hayden. Or Senator Hayden, we have you on.
Okay.
It looks like. Okay.
It looks like you guys wanted me to join you. You had me as a participant there. That wasn't just so we can say that wasn't Indiria's fault. That was somebody else. How are you guys? Good to see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you. Thank you for joining us,
so
Senator
good to
Hayden.
see you guys. It's great faces here. Just to Jasmine, thank you so much, Justin. Good to see you guys and my fellow legislative colleagues. Sorry that we have the technical difficulties and then I have to leave to go to a neighborhood Zoom meeting. Just want to say thank you. We are, as Jasmine said, we're still the middle of our legislative session. We worked really hard, and I will let Representative Moran and others talk about the work that they did on the law enforcement bill. We in the Senate really worked hard. A lot of it behind the scenes, the way that the negotiations went. I think many of us know it wasn't exactly what we want, but it was the first step of moving forward. And once again, I'll let Representative Moran and others who are much more intimately involved articulate all the moving parts there. COVID-19 is still here. It's a big deal. It is disproportionately affecting members of our Black POCI community. And so I want to continue to have people mask up and social distance and wash their hands. I know Senator Champion has been intimately involved in a few issues, one of them being education as it relates to kids going back to school and making sure that all of our children have a device to link if there's going to be if there's going to be distance learning or some hybrid of that, as well as internet connection. And so we've been working pretty hard. I shouldn't just say Senator Champion, Representative Noor, Representative Hassan, and I'm sure everybody has been working on that. Our children are already in the gap, and we think that that is going to be even larger if we don't get that together. And once again, as Jasmine said, we're still working on a bonding bill. We have about $30 million in cash that was slated for POCI, BPI, CI, whatever we calling ourselves now, communities to really work on those, and it's been well distributed. I've worked on a lot, and so has other members of this caucus. So we're hoping that we can come back in September, notwithstanding some issues around bond sales, and get this work done. We haven't completed our work, and really it is a stance that the minority leader in the House has taken on trying to get rid of the governor's peacetime emergency authority is really the linchpin of holding up a lot of things of getting done and finally ending this session. So once again, there are so many things to talk about, and so many of my colleagues who've worked on them, I don't want to take their thunder, and I just want to say thank you, and thank you for all your support. Keep up the good work, and Justin, good luck to you in your next endeavor, and let's keep things going. Looks like the council's in pretty good shape, and I'm very proud of you guys.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator Hayden, for being able to join us this evening. So we're going to continue with our event that we have going on, and we'll get things moving. So just to shift over to hear from all of our African Heritage legislators we have on the line. They are all going to get 4 minutes, and they are going to discuss their top bills they chief offered before pre-COVID, as well as specific bills that impact people of African heritage. They're going to highlight some of their committee work for the committees they serve on before break, as well as in response to COVID-19, and then those legislative priorities and bills that they introduced during the first and second special session, which is a tongue twister. So to get that started, I'm going to start with Senator Champion. Senator Champion is the senator for Senate District 59. He is also the ranking minority member of the Jobs and Economic Growth, Finance, and Policy Division, as well as the Capital Investment Committee, the Commerce and Consumer Protection Finance and Policy Committee, as well as the Finance Committee. So we will have Senator Champion, to go ahead and discuss his work this session, as well as during our special session.
Well, let me say thank you for having me, and I'm going to stay 4 minutes or less, and I just want to thank everyone who's responsible for being with us tonight. As Senator Hayden mentioned, there's certain work I'm going to reserve for Representative Moran and other House members, because they really did work hard on the law enforcement reform bill and what that ended up being. One of the reasons why we constantly say that, because most people realize that in the Senate, we are in the minority, or Democrats are in the minority. And so they had to do a lot of work around twisting the arms and limbs and anything else that you can think of the Senate Republicans in order to get anything done. So I'm appreciative of the effort that they put in, knowing that this is a first step, and we are going to continue to go forward together, which also gives us a bird's eye view into what could be in the event that we do the right thing this election cycle. Most people forget about this is because it feels like we've been in the pandemic forever, But I always like to remind people that prior to February, we were busy thinking about what we're going to do with $1.5 billion, right, as a surplus. And we had all sorts of things that we were thinking about: supplemental budget, the bonding bill. In fact, there are some other policy things that we were putting forward. So I'll just highlight some as opposed to all. Use of force. I had a use of force bill even before the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, where we believed that it was important to change the standard by which to look at when police can use force. And it is my contention that it should only be when it's necessary. So there's a bill that that I put forward in the Senate, and I believe it was Ray Dean who carried it in the House. And then components of that was also ultimately a part of what was in the final bill that the House really negotiated. Another bill that I seem to put forward almost every year, because I got it passed twice in the Senate, and at a time when we had the House and the Senate, unfortunately, it wasn't taken up in the House. It's called Restore the Vote. Most people know this bill would allow individuals who may be on felony probation but not incarcerated to be able to vote. I believe that voting is the bedrock of our democracy, and we know that our vote is our voice. So that's something that I've been working hard on. And what I also would like to call second chance legislation. So anything that you would think about how to give individuals an opportunity for second chances, I've historically worked on those things, from being the chief author of Ban the Box to the new expungement law. All those are things. The equity bill that we authored in 2016, all those things around second chance and giving our community opportunity. And in fact, when you think in terms of the equity bill that we did in 2016, we have now spent over $100 million making investments in communities of color. And when I say communities of color, I really do mean communities of color. That's in our Somali community, that's in our Hmong community, that's in our Latino community, all across the state as well. So it's not just in the metropolitan area. Since COVID, needless to say, there's been a lot of fighting going on, because when COVID first came out, there's a lot of misinformation. And when the governor, who was doing a really good job with his briefings, that information was only getting to a certain segment of our society. So outside of just voting, people sometimes think about the work that all of us do around voting. But I would also like to elevate the fact that I led, along with the other folks on this line, along with ethnic media, a charge in order to say, hey, we need more resources be given to ethnic media. That's print, television, radio, whatever it is, in order to make sure our communities are getting the language, getting the information in the language that is important, or tailored in a way that they could deal with it, and so that they can make the necessary adjustments. So ethnic media, and so there's been major investments, and we're grateful to Governor Walz for doing that. And last two things that I will say, we've been also leading a fight around making sure that communities of color, especially urban corridors, folks are getting the technology that's in need, because distance learning has been difficult, not just distant, but difficult for our communities, and not to mention folks who speak English as a second language. And so it's been important to me that I've been fighting around broadband and technology and computers, and making sure we have access to all the things that we need, and tutorial services, because our parents now being required to teach our kids or take a leading role in teaching them while at home. This is new for everyone. And so those are just some of the things that I wanted to talk about outside of the rebuilding efforts from the civil unrest. We know it's going to cost roughly $1 billion, and I'll let Representative Noor speak more to that, because he's also been leading those efforts in the House, and I've been pushing those efforts in the Senate. And so I'll reserve some opportunities for him to talk about that as well. So that is where I'll stop.
Thank you, Senator Champion. And thank you for highlighting a lot of that work, like the equity grants and the equity dollars and whatnot that you've been, that you and others have been championing for the last few years. Jasmine, are you ready to introduce the next member?
Yes. So next we are going to have Chair Moran. Chair Moran is the chair for the Health and Human Service Policy Committee in the House. She is the representative for Senate District 65A. She also serves on the Health and Human Service Finance Division, as well as the Jobs and Economic Development Finance Division. So during this time, Chair Moran, if you could just use this 4 minutes to share those top bills you chief authored pre-COVID and after, as well as highlights from the committees you serve on, elevating those bills that impact people of African heritage, and then those priorities that you had during that first and second special session.
Well, good evening, everyone. Shakira and Jasmine and Justin Terrell. Thank you for the work that you do with the council to uplift and bring the voices of the Black community, the African heritage community, from the community to the Capitol, but also take what you are hearing and what you're doing from the Capitol and taking it back out into the community, so that we are always informed, we're always engaged, and we're always a part of the decision-making process. So if we're going to create change that's going to uplift our community, we have to be at the table, and we have to know the importance of the legislative process, but also creating bills and policies that impacts our community, back out in the community. So again, just thank you so much for the work that you do to make sure our communities, our Black communities, are informed and engaged in part of the process. So let me just think, the 2020 legislative session, you know, it seems like so far away with COVID-19 coming in and stopping all that we were doing. But I will briefly talk about a few bills, one being the Crown Bill, which is also a bill that the council was tracking and supporting. The Crown Bill is meaning creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, which is really a bill to stop discrimination of natural hair. And so I was really excited about that bill. And 3 of the reasons why this bill was important in Minnesota, but also across the country. It does 3 things based on data. Data tells us that African American women are 80% more likely to change their natural hair to meet the US-centric standards of appearance, to meet the social norms or expectations at work. African American women are 50% more likely to be sent home or know of an African American woman who have been sent home from the workplace because of her hair. And African American women are 30% more likely to receive a formal grooming policy in the workplace. And so this bill inserted the definition around discrimination, and expanded around race, expand the definition of race to include hair textures, hairstyles, such as braids, locks, and twists. And so that bill was able to move through the House of Representatives. It came to the House floor, and it passed off the House floor. It didn't get much traction in the Senate, only because we have a Republican Senate who seems to not be able to recognize that race matter or to see color. But it's a great bill that we're going to continue to work on. Had great support from the community that came out to testify and share their stories around the discrimination that was done on the workplace, in schools, with our little kids. Sometimes our kids are teased in school, and the teacher, you know, they do nothing. That is not okay. So we're going to make sure that type of behavior is not, that does not happen, and folks are not losing a job because of the style of their natural hair, and that it is also would be illegal to discriminate. Also, I carried a bill, one of the other bills that was really important to me that did not make it. It was called House File 1050, which really is around background checks in the foster care arena. So what we do know that we have a disproportionate number of our African American children who are being removed from their homes, and often they are not placed with relatives, their grandmothers, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, and instead they are put into foster care in foster homes and put in out-of-home displacement. And so the foster care bill would easily just allow, first, when children are removed from their home, they should be placed with a relative. But we know sometimes that background of individual is a barrier for parents and guardians and family members to be able to have kinship care. So this bill would have removed a lot of the barriers that are in place for individuals to get a foster care license. So we're going to continue to work on that. Senator Champion has been a huge champion on issues around foster care, out-of-home placement, reestablish parents getting their parental rights back. This is what this bill is all about. It's creating that opportunity and possibility. So we're going to continue to work on House File 1050. I'm hoping that in special session 3 that we can move this. I have a little issue with Senator Limmer over in the Senate who has been given, who refused to give me a hearing on that bill. But we're going to continue work for this bill because it's really important for Black families to have our kids in the homes with them. Really quick, I would like to talk a little bit about the Minnesota Police Accountability Act of 2020. And so it was a litany of bills that we brought to the House, and we brought it, when others around the country was introducing 1 and 2 or maybe 5 different bills, we decided that we would put everything on the table that we thought that needed to hold police accountable for police brutality. So the act included 18 original provisions that we divided into 3 categories. The first category was reclaiming community oversight and was putting power into the hands of the people and neighborhoods that police officers are sworn to serve and protect. Those were bills like the warrior, prohibiting the warrior training, prohibiting chokeholds, the duty to intercede, police residency reform, some data collection and regulatory reform, looking at the arbitration reforms, and those were the bills under the Reclaiming Community Oversight. The other title was Reforming Accountability, and what that did was restore the confidence and trust in the system that are meant to provide justice for all Minnesotans, including Black people. And under that category was the use of force reform, the prosecutory reform, the investigatory reform, and the cash bail. And then the last category was the reimagining public safety. What do public safety need to look like in the 21st century? And so that was to end the unacceptable culture that is responsible for the murder of George Floyd and far too many others who look just like the George Floyd, including Philando Castile and so many other Black men and women who've been murdered and use of force has been used for Black men and women. And under that category was the public safety peer counseling debriefing, police officer critical incident review, community-led public safety, mental health training, autism training, and restore the vote. And so from those 18 provisions, 11 of those 18 provisions became law that was signed into law by the governor on Tuesday of last week.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
And I just want to share with community that, this is a beginning. It is not the end. When you have to work with a body whose values do not align with our values, it's difficult for them to see value in you and me and us in our community. It is hard for them to not want to just support police officers and to see community. And I just want to share a few, just going into those first negotiations with Representative Gazelka and Limmer and Representative Ingebritz, along with 2 of my Republican colleagues from the House. And so we walked into that meeting. It was 4 Republicans sitting at the table in the room in the Capitol. Myself and Chief Mariani walked into that room. And as we walked into that room and we sat down and waited for them to respond, I don't know about you, but if you ever went into a room and you can feel maybe the room was tense, maybe there was something going on in that environment. I walked into that room and I sat down and I could feel the arrogance that was coming from Senator Limmer, Senator Emmerich, Representative Johnson, and Representative O'Neill. And I'm calling it arrogance. Some people can call it many other things. You might can call it, you know, their white privilege. You can call it racism. You can call it a lot of things. I'm going to take the high road and call it the arrogance of them, who we sat down before them and said, now what do we do now that we passed this bill in the House? How do we move forward? And the first thing they said to us as a Black legislator and a Latino legislator is that we have not read your bill. That is what we were dealing with.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I apologize. You're a little bit over on time. But I want you to conclude your comment just because I want to remind the public that we are a nonpartisan body and that we do not, you know, we don't have any Republicans on the call tonight. And so I just want to make sure that people know that they were invited. But if you want to conclude your comments, I would deeply appreciate it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I could wrap it up by just saying that and just want my Black community to know the value of your voice and the value of us being engaged. And, you know, as a Black legislator, just to say to you that my work at the legislature is to fight for social, racial, economic, and environmental justice in all its form. And that's something that I try to do. And that's something I try to do with community. And that's what I would like to continue to do, is to do this work, not by myself, but to do it with you. So I just thank all of you for your advocacy and your hard work that you do under challenging moments.
Thank you, Representative Moran. And I would just say to all of you, like, there's 201 legislators at the Capitol and there's 7 Black legislators. And so my hat is off to you all and having to, you know, bridge so often and labor so hard to make sure that our community's needs are centered in a body that is not designed to center our community's needs. And so I see all of you grinding. And so I'll kick it back to Jasmine. I do want to say something real quick, just that Senator Corrin was on the call listening. And I'm just going to reach out to him since we don't have another Republican on the call tonight and see if he would like to say something later on the call. But we'll stick with the agenda for now. And thank you for your comments, Representative Moran. Jasmine?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Moran, for your comments. Up next, we are going to have Representative Noor, who represents Senate District 60B. He is also the Vice Chair for Jobs and Economic Development Finance Division. He also serves on the Health and Human Service Finance Division, as well as the Judiciary Finance and Civil Law Division, and Ways and Means. So he has a lot that he is involved in the Minnesota House of Representatives. So Representative Noor, if you would take these 4 minutes just to address those top bills you chief authored and co-authored, as well as those highlights from the committees you serve on, and those legislative priorities and bills you introduced during that first and second special session.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, and also just wanted to echo the sentiments from Senator Bobby Joe. Justin, thank you so much, Justin Terrell, for your service. We appreciate all the work that you've done. This has been a difficult moment with COVID-19 and then followed by the murder of George Floyd and also the civil unrest. Quite frankly, if we go back to where we started in 2019 to 2020, the COVID-19 had impacted our communities significantly. I believe there's more than 20% of the state number compared to the other communities. That's significant, knowing that we are about 6% in total for Black Minnesotans. So that's a huge disparity that we already see on top of the disparity that exists in our healthcare system. One of the things that we initially passed was the unemployment benefit, which we all know that the $600 additional funding will expire. This week is the final week. We don't have other alternatives. And compared to the data, if you look at the numbers, 1 in 2 Black Minnesota is unemployed. Let that sink in. Kind of a system whereby we are the last hired and then the first fired. So on top of the pandemic, we're dealing with a significant economic insecurity. As my bill passed, it was to really allow us to tap into the federal resources for the unemployment. But we've worked very hard also to rebuild our cities, significantly trying to invest into those corridors from Broadway to University, Midway to Lake Street. That's something which we can never walk away from, especially for businesses owned by people of color, indigenous, who have been significantly damaged or destroyed. Over 1,500 businesses have been impacted. So as I carried the Promise Act bill, is to ensure that we help those businesses who have been left out, those who have been impacted. And we'll keep on pushing through this, the legislative session, which is coming up. I'm hoping we can help those businesses not only come back to the way they were, as my sister Horton will say, but in a better place than how it is right now. And because she represents also that area with Senator Jeff Hayden, who has also been at the forefront, and Bobby Joe and Rena. In fact, all of us, if you look at the number of the Black legislators, almost all of us, our districts were impacted by the civil unrest, and our communities are asking for the support. I don't want to also forget that we passed the House Resolution 1, which really declared racism as a public health crisis. That was a significant move in the House of Representatives. That was a one chamber resolution, and I'm proud of our colleague, our sister, Ruth Richardson, who carried the bill. This will create an opportunity to start talking about racism in our systems, from education to healthcare to housing to economic development. Quite frankly, when you look at the crisis that we have right now, I appreciate the governor's effort to put the $100 million for the housing. We have got so many unsheltered individuals who are sleeping on the streets, in the parks. And so this is somehow, once the pandemic ends, once the peacetime emergency ends, we'll see many people losing their homes, many people who are going to continue to be homeless. And that's a shame that we don't have a place. We don't give people a place with dignity and respect. To really address that issue is critical for me, that we have a system in place once the pandemic ends. The last piece I just wanted to talk about is the Minnesota Police Accountability Act. Representative Moran, Chair Moran, talked about it. This was a significant move compared to where we were. We have made a step forward to addressing the issues of policing in our communities, even including the critical incident stress management and public safety peer counseling. What that means is when you have good police officers coming into our communities, they're dealing with other stress based on the job that they're in, that they can get the care, not only bashing them, but also allowing them to get that care so that they can be able to come to work in a way that will serve better our communities. We change how we do the investigations when police are involved in incidents. We also created a partial change in police residency requirement with some incentives. We also we banned the chokehold, and quite frankly, not completely, but based on if in fact that we can save a life, that is, the sanctity of life is important than anything else. We had changed the police use of force. We also have the reporting. If you don't have transparency, when an incident happens, if you don't have a hub, a place where you can get that data, that does not ensure integrity of the police system. We also changed, modified a little bit, and also added community engagement or citizen engagement to the post board. That is the Minnesota Police Officers, Peace Officers Training Standards and Training Board, which actually serves a critical juncture in ensuring there's accountability. We also did some changes with mental health, as it has been covered. So with that, I think there's more to talk about, but I think that's just a summary of things that we worked on. Finally, we do have the bonding bill, the capital investment. I included a provision that will allow affordable home ownership, especially in our communities when we're using the housing infrastructure bond. And I urge you to talk to the governor's office, to our colleagues to support that initiative so that we can really close the gap of home ownership in our communities. Even prior to the COVID-19, only 20% of the Black community owned homes compared to almost close to 80% white community members. So I think that's a significant gap, and we can start dismantling those gaps by addressing the need that exists. So thank you so much, Justin, and look forward to the conversations tonight.
Thank you so much, Representative Noor. And before we get to our last representative, I just want to let everyone know that is on the call, we are going to be taking Q&A from the legislators sometime during this program. So if you would please, we're taking that on Facebook Live, so please send questions that way, as well as through the Q&A feature on the Zoom call that we are on today. So next, I'm going to have Representative Hayden Hassan, who will be speaking. Representative Hayden Hassan is the representative for Senate District 62A. She sits on the chair of the Education Policy Committee, as well as the Housing, Finance, and Policy Division, the Jobs and Economic Development Finance Division, Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Division, the Rules and Legislative Administration Division, and she is also in leadership with the role of an Assistant Majority Leader in the House. So thank you so much for joining us today, Representative Hassan. If you could just spend these 4 minutes just talking about those top bills you chief authored and co-authored that impact people of African heritage, as well as highlights from the committees you serve on, as well as those legislative priorities and bills that were introduced during that first and second special session.
Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, everyone who's on the call. I want to also thank Justin Trell for his leadership and the many years he has served as leading the Council of African Heritage. We're going to miss you, Justin. Hopefully the next executive director is as good as you are. My name's Hayden Hassan. I serve South Minneapolis. 2020 has been one heck of a year. We started talking about surplus. We started talking about, bold vision and all the things that we're going to accomplish during the 2020 legislative session. And for me, one of the biggest things that I challenge myself and others around me is using racial equity lenses on every legislation that we're carrying, looking at how each legislation impacts the Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Minnesota. As we know, Minnesota is a great state if you are a white person, but it's also, a terrible place to live if you're a person of color in every sector: health, education, wealth, housing. By March, we had a pandemic that hit the Black community the hardest, followed by the unfortunate murder of and gruesome murder of Brother George Floyd. May he rest in power, and the civil unrest that followed that. So during COVID-19, as soon as COVID-19 started, we always know that when there is catastrophe or disasters or pandemic or whatever you call this that's happening to us, when there's a problem, it's going to impact people at the most vulnerable. So we knew as soon as this started that it's going to hit our communities the hardest. People who don't have enough money, people who are one paycheck away from, being kicked out of their homes, businesses who are one paycheck away from paying for their rent and being closed, down. So we advocated for business loans. The first business loans that we did and fought hard for, alongside with Representative Noor and Representative Moran, who both served with me in the Jobs Committee. Then we find out that overwhelmingly majority of our community did not get those business loans because of the way that they were set up. We also find out within the first few weeks of going into COVID-19 and distance learning that thousands of kids from the Black community don't have access to internet or Chromebooks. Minneapolis alone, the first week was reporting that over 10,000 kids don't have access to internet or Chromebooks. Also, many issues related to people not being able or not having access to apply for unemployment benefits or having some sort of a barrier. Also, housing. We advocated for halting evictions. That was the governor's executive order, and one of the reasons why we're fighting to not end the governor's emergency powers. Of course, we need those emergency powers, but also what's going to happen if we, if these emergency powers end and there are hundreds of thousands of evictions. Right now, evictions are on halt, like the eviction moratorium, what happens? And then we also fought for $100 million of rental and mortgage assistance that recently the governor announced that's available right now. All in all, like our communities right now, whether it's the Black community or the Indigenous community or communities of color or Latinx communities that are non-white communities are struggling in this pandemic. They're struggling. I represent Lake Street, which was many businesses were burned down during the civil unrest. We still have no means or no way to help those businesses because every time we bring up the assistance for those businesses, it doesn't go anywhere. We don't have any Senate. Our Senate counterparts are not working with us on that issue because they're hang on the idea that Minneapolis, our leadership let Minneapolis burn, so we shouldn't be helping, or whatever politics it is. I'm not going to get into the politics of this, and I'm not going to get into the partisan issues of this or bipartisan whatever. What I'm going to say is that in the midst of the two parties, butting heads together, our community loses the most. Because right now, we have businesses that were impacted by the civil unrest. Many businesses who are Black and brown businesses, who are small businesses who may have one full-time person or don't even have a full-time person, just the owner working around the clock, that were, either burned down or there's a water damage or there's looting that happened and everything is gone. Those businesses are sitting idle right now because they don't have assistance from the state. They don't have assistance from the city. There is nothing that's happening for them. So for me, my fight is to make sure that the voices of these businesses are echoed on the House floor and the need for rebuilding Lake Street, rebuilding West Broadway, rebuilding University Avenue. And we have, Representative Moran did that, I did that, Representative Noor did that. I'm sure our Senate, counterparts who are on the call did that, Senator Hayden and Senator Champion. I don't know if there's another senator on the call with us. But at the end, we have not had the warm, or empathetic response that we were hoping that our communities, many weeks later that are still sitting on businesses that are closed because they have not received the help that they need. We are far away from being done. We're going back to third special session, and we're hoping that we're going to pass the bonding bill. There is an equity lenses on the bonding bill. Not enough, if you ask me, but people think that I'm radical, so it's not. Some people may say there is some equity, but I say it's not enough. We have a long fight and a hard fight to fight. Minnesota, as we know, has terrible disparity numbers, and we gotta address those numbers. And the only way you can address those numbers is first to invest in communities that have not been invested in many years. That's where the problem starts. with education, with health disparity, with wealth gap, with housing. And that's what I'm there for, is to be that voice, that voice of reason, to make sure that our communities' voices are heard and their voices are being echoed on the House floor every time I get a chance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Hassan. Before we end on the opening remarks from legislators, I wanted to read a statement from Representative Demuth, who serves in the House, and she was not able to attend this evening. So she wanted to leave some remarks with those attendees to talk about her time during the legislature this past session and the two special sessions we have had. So from Representative Demuth, thank you for the important work that you do, as SEMA keeps the legislature informed on issues faced by Minnesotans of African heritage. We are able to make decisions with a broader understanding in many areas. As our state, nation, and the world face the COVID-19 pandemic, we're forced to change everything about life as we know it. Unemployment increased dramatically. Our children began distance learning, access to healthcare changed, isolation and stress dramatically increased. We are still working our way through all of these situations and more. As a member of the Education Finance Committee, I recognize the disparities within our system that has allowed the achievement gap to continue to grow. I was a co-author on HF 3658, which would amend the Minnesota Constitution to provide that all children have a fundamental right to qualify to quality education. I also supported a number of other bills, HF 824, as well as HF 4443, HF 4161, and many more that would increase teachers of color, increase literacy, and develop educational partnerships. We have so much work to do in the area of education, and I am committed to continuing the work that will allow all students to be successful. The killing of George Floyd brought deep, long-time racial tensions to the surface. The protests and the forthcoming riots have forced our state to look at where we are and begin to move toward healing and restoration. I have worked and will keep working in a bipartisan way toward solutions for the people and businesses that have suffered damage. I am committed to working within the legislature to build understanding and trust, to listen and to learn. Our regular session ended in May, and we have been called into special session in both June and July. We await the governor's direction this week for school, which will be starting into the fall. The teachers and support staff need this direction, and families are waiting to see what the beginning of the school year will look like. We will be called in for a third special session in August. I am hopeful that the governor will end his emergency powers and allow the three co-equal branches of government to function as intended. And that is from Representative Lisa Demuth from the House of Representatives, who is also a legislator of African heritage, who was not able to attend. Also, Representative Ruth Richardson has a conflict, and she was able to stop in for a few minutes. So once if she's able to join us, I will give her the line and she will be able to give a few remarks. So before since we have a few legislators that are going to be leaving a little early, I wanted to make sure that we got some of the audience Q&A that has been coming in. We have questions coming in from Facebook as well as the chat. And if we could have Amber Jones, who is going to be helping with the Q&A, just read one or two of the questions that we got from the audience for legislators. So then that way we are able to get going on that.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm excited for this conversation. So Jasmine, did you want me to start with the audience questions or the predetermined ones?
So we will do a few of the audience questions, and then I can dive back into the predetermined ones. Okay. I just want to make sure before we get Chair Moran off, I know there was one around child protection.
Yeah. Yes. So there's a question in the chat. I would like to know if there are plans for the child care system. A lot of Black child care businesses are struggling, as well as having to close their programs. Most of them could not access the SBA loans. So are there any plans for the child care system?
I'll take that one. When we talk about the SICA program or general subsidy in the childcare, there is a $56 million that the CARES Act money that has been forwarded to. I believe if you're in the metro area, you can apply through Think Small. We did have initially $30 million. In fact, the recent grant, the 10,000 grants that we passed, if you applied, there was a deadline, you may qualify for that. So quite frankly, I think there are some changes that the department can help you. And if you work with the CDFIs, the registered CDFIs, they can help you find some resources that may come from foundations and other places. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help you and guide you.
Great, thank you, Representative Noor. And then Representative Moran, did you have any comments around the child care question as well?
So I was just thinking, along with what Representative Noor talked about, that we do know that daycare, child care centers are being impacted by COVID-19. Most had to close down. Only a few are open in relationship to essential workers. And again, as Representative Noor talked about, there are some small business loans. And I know she said he or she applied for a grant and was denied. And I know in Ramsey County, I'm not too sure where they're located, but I know in Ramsey County, you know, we allocate dollars, we send it out to counties and cities, and they put up a lot of, I'm going to call it barriers that would allow individuals to qualify for those loans. I did talk to a young man in Ramsey County a couple of weeks ago that says there's another set of loans that will be coming out the end of the month where they are removing a lot of the qualifications for or qualifications that is needed to access those loans. So I'm just saying, you know, check in with your city, check in with the county, and again, you know, I'm not working too much on other learning right now, and definitely check in with Representative Noor.
All right, thank you. We're going to do one more question before I turn back over to Jasmine. So this was another audience question. Will there be an opportunity during the August special session to follow Colorado's lead and begin working to limit qualified immunity as a defense? If not in August, is there a willingness by the Posse Caucus to begin this work in the 2021 legislative session? So I want to represent Moran. This is directing the question a little bit to the Posse Caucus, if you have any replies to that.
I did reply to that, but I want to say that I don't think we're going to be able to do anything about that during the special session, but I'm definitely interested in, and I can also share that with our Posse Caucus members. It's something that we may can lead on, but I am specifically interested in that. So if you can send me an email at rep.rena.moran@house.mn, we can do some follow-up conversations.
Great. And then Senator Champion, if you also have any comments from the Senate side on this question about limiting qualified immunity, that would be great.
Sorry about that. I was trying to press the buttons in order to get back on. So the same thing applies, because I know there was already some conversation about qualified immunity. Those were some of the bills that we had put forward. Again, I don't think that we're going to be able to do anything during the third special session in August, but we certainly are going to continue to try to build on the work that was already done. And there was a question I saw also in chat, because I'm going to have to get off, that was asking about whether we were going to do anything around Minnesota Statute 245C, which is specifically around convicted of a crime and being able to use against it. So I did have a bill out there to limit DHS's power because I believe that is fundamentally and constitutionally unfair that you can have an agency that license someone, and if someone was ever arrested but never charged with a crime, that state agency had the ability to look at what limited information without cross-examination, without any other input, and determine what the charges would have been and use that as a basis to deny someone a license. So I have put forth the bill there, and I'm going to continue to introduce that bill because I believe that that's just fundamentally unfair, and it falls disproportionately on people of color, needless to say.
So much, Senator Champion. I'm going to turn it back over to Jasmine so that we can continue with our program. Thank you. Continue to share your questions.
Hey, thank you so much, Amber. And thank you, audience members who were able to submit those questions in. We will take breaks and make sure that we can get those questions that you have keep coming answered. So just going back to the program, now a lot of you have mentioned the executive powers and working with Governor Walz. But the next question is, if you could please give your analysis of Governor Walz's leadership during this difficult time in our state and our country, during this time of the executive powers being in effect. So in regards to the response from the governor and the executive branch's response to COVID-19, as well as the murder of George Floyd and the state's response with the Department of Human Rights investigation, as well as A.G. Ellison taking on the lead as a co-prosecutor. Just any assessment for the community members who are watching and know that you are working with the executive branch, what that looks like. And this question is open to all legislators. And here, if no one wants to start,
Started. Sometimes
Representative Noor.
Unless you name somebody, it's really tough for people to just to jump in through Zoom because you cannot read the facial expressions, or you cannot just say, you go ahead. But anyway, I think you started with the question, how are we doing with the peacetime emergency powers of the government? You have seen the what other states are going through right now. And I think given where we are, the governor has done a good job. He has done a fabulous job in really creating a process where we can flatten the curve, be able to be prepared, reduce the number of people who are going to be impacted by COVID-19. Unfortunately, the numbers are still going up. Quite frankly, the mask mandate, which from the scientific perspective, we've listened to scientists, we've seen the data. It's really important that we stay ahead of all the things that are happening. Quite frankly, even when you look at the impact on our communities, we usually say the COVID-19 is a great equalizer, but it's not. It's impacting us significantly. And the work that he has done to ensure that the moratorium on the eviction, providing support to small businesses, to creating more opportunities for the distance learning, which we'll be hearing soon on Thursday. His leadership has been phenomenal. So we will have to look into some of the orders and ensure that we can debate them in a good way, but at least calling a quit at this moment is not an option. We need to stay fighting the pandemic. It's not gone yet. It's still, even those states that opened up quickly, they're facing the challenges of keeping up with the ICU and so many other things. I'll give him, he's done a good job for that. We'll keep on working with him to ensure that we maintain the safety for our communities, for our loved ones, for our state, and think about how we can really improve some of the other things as we go forward. We are not out of the woods, and we'll keep on doing that. So some of the other issues I think we have covered in terms of the civil unrest, what happened in Minneapolis, and all those things. I think there's a more information that is needed to really see what happened and how did things happen during the crisis that we were facing. But those are different conversation at different time. But we'll keep up what we're doing right now, and I look forward to extending the peacetime emergency during the next special session.
Thank you so much, Representative Noor. Representative Hassan, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure. So in order for us to evaluate what the work the governor is doing, we also have to evaluate ourselves. Did we start at a playing field that's even? Absolutely not. We started with playing field that is uneven. We had disparities prior to COVID-19. We had disparities and inequities prior to George Floyd's murder. So our issues did not start because of COVID. COVID is the great amplifier. It amplified all the problems that we had. It just laid bare the structural flaws in our systems. In my opinion, the governor is doing okay for what he's working with. We went through some things that, no one was expecting. No one was expecting a pandemic that that destroys our economy, that puts many people into the hospitals, that killed over 1,500 Minnesotans and over 140,000 Americans, and is impacting about 4 million Americans. So I think that, in my opinion, the governor is doing a good job with what he's working with. And when I say we as a community, as in one Minnesota, the governor's campaign slogan was one Minnesota. That one Minnesota has to include everybody, every Minnesotan, whether they're Black, brown, Christian, Muslim, Jew, from the LGBTQ community, whatever, however they identify themselves, they have to include. We as one Minnesota have to fight to make sure that we allocate resources for people that are in need. I am a housing advocate at heart. My district's 86% renters. So for me and the people that I represent, ending the eviction moratorium will be a nightmare unless something changed in our economy, unless people, have a better income. Reducing the unemployment, benefits is going to be terrible for communities of color, indigenous community, Black community of Minnesota, and poor communities, unless, economy gets better and people go back to work. So I think that, we can't evaluate the governor by what's happening. We are fighting, with an enemy that we can't see. We're in unprecedented times. There are so many things happening. And I think that he's doing the best he can. Could we do better? Yes. Could we do more? Absolutely, we could do more. And that's my take on this.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Representative Hassan. Both of you, your perspectives. It's great to hear from another African heritage legislator who works with the governor to give that perspective to communities and knowing both sides. Next, you both sit on the Jobs and Economic Division Committee with Representative Noor being the vice chair of that committee. With special session possibly coming in August, what would a bonding bill look like if it was able to pass? And what investments in community could bonding add right now? If we could start with Representative Noor, and then we'll get to Representative Hassan.
Although I don't sit in the capital investment or the bonding committee, I think the significance of the bonding cannot be underestimated. We know this is the right moment in terms of the state in investing in the economic engine of our state. If you look at the resource that we're going to be spending, Those are mostly in, places, entities that are owned by state or the higher education or, owned by local government. They all need help. We've got crumbling infrastructures that need to be replaced. It creates jobs, it provides opportunity for communities. And for the first time, I think the governor added equity funding, which is to support communities who have never been able to be included in the capital investment. But I'm more looking forward to the housing component. We asked for 500 million. I think the proposal has been 100. I'm hoping that we can go above the $100 housing infrastructure bond. But we also underfunded the public housing, which we were expecting 50 million. Right now it stands at $16 million, which is really, really significant underfunding for the public housing. And above all, I think the inclusion that I made an amendment to include home ownership to be included in the housing infrastructure, what do you call HIBs, which is housing infrastructure bonds, to create opportunity for communities to own homes, to build the wealth that they've been left out. And quite frankly, the negotiations and the conversations on the bonding are still ongoing, and we will keep on getting more input from the community. We'll see where we land at the end, but it also includes some tax provisions. One of the things that we wanted to be done quickly is to provide property tax abatements for the buildings that have been destroyed. Also provide the tax refund for the supplies and equipments, those things that people need to rebuild the corridors that have been impacted by the civil unrest.
So, and I also don't sit in the capital investment, and I may not have all the details I need to talk about the bonding. What I know is that even though the governor has added a piece of equity into the bonding, in my opinion, the bonding doesn't have enough teeth for equity. It doesn't touch all the problems that we're faced with. Housing is one of the biggest problems that we're faced with statewide. Of course, most individuals who are unhoused are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I carried a legislation that funded shelters, $50 million for shelter funding, and that legislation didn't make it into the bonding bill, which kind of frustrates me, because we're in a time where housing is like one of the biggest problems we're faced with, besides the pandemic and our economy crashing, and housing is not included in the shelter funding is not included in the bonding bill. I know that we are in a deficit because of the pandemic and what's happening with our economy, but I still say that the bonding bill that is in front of us right now caters to mainstream Minnesota, and that's my opinion.
Thank you so much, both of you, for giving that analysis on bonding and just explaining what it is, but knowing that it's not addressing those specific needs that the African heritage community needs at this time, and what it could do right now. Before we go back to audience Q&A, I want to just take some time to kind of, if you could just share with the audience 1 to 2 minutes about any last words about what's on the horizon in the next few months. We know there's that potential August special session, as well as elections for each seat at the state legislature, as well as a new biennium with an upcoming budget year in 2021. If you could just share any last words and what Minnesotans of African Heritage should be aware of, what issues still need to be addressed, and then anything you would want to leave with them before we get back into Q&A from the audience. And we'll start with Representative Noor.
So we will definitely have a special session. I just wanted to explain, as long as the governor intends to continue with the peacetime emergency, we have to be in session. So for sure, we'll be in session immediately after the primary elections, which is happening on August 11th. So I encourage people to participate in the upcoming election. This is one of the most important elections in our lifetime, and I think I encourage folks to get involved, whoever they intend to vote for. That's their right, and I think we need to show up in big number during this primary election. And then after that, it's the general election to determine who is going to lead our state in the House and in the Senate. So all the seats for the House and the Senate up for grabs. And I think this is an important conversation that we need to be having in our communities in terms of representation, in terms of creating an opportunity, and also looking at the issue of COVID-19. But what we know of is there'll be a significant deficit. And when that deficit hits the wall, we know that the people who are going to be impacted the most are the people who need the most. So our goal is to ensure that we protect the systems that provide at least that limited resources for education, for housing, for healthcare, those essentials, and having safety net programs that help communities just to stay and be able to continue to live by the small means that we get.
So yes, we're going back to special session. And if we're lucky, we're gonna pass the bonding bill. I don't know whether that's gonna happen or not. But I don't think there's anything else that we're expecting except the bonding bill. There's still the legislation to help the impacted areas, the impacted areas that after George Floyd's murder, the civil unrest has impacted. But I don't know whether that legislation has, enough teeth to get support from the Senate, our Senate counterparts. So I guess we will have to see, but we're still gonna bring that forward. Yes, we have a primary that's in August 11, and I like Representative Mohammed Noor said, please vote. Your best weapon to change is voting people out and voting people in, depending on who holds your true value and who's fighting for you. That's your right and responsibility as a citizen of this great state. So I encourage everybody to go out and vote and participate voting. Yes, November we'll have an election, and I guess we'll have to see if we still have a divided legislator or not. If we're the only state in the country that has a divided legislator, which complicates things and makes things harder. You would think that, because we have a divided legislature, that there will be more, collaboration and working together, but it makes things hard. It makes really things hard. You can't pass anything. And I don't know if my sister, Ruth Richardson, is gonna join us or not, but I will mention that Ruth has been fighting for a legislation that ends preschool suspension. I don't know if everybody knows this or not. Preschoolers in Minnesota get suspended, and many of them happen to be Black young kids, 3 and 4-year-olds. Ruth has been working towards ending preschool suspensions for the last 2 years. And on the first special session, I'm saying special election, special session, we were able to pass that. So congratulations to her. We also, did a House resolution to, declare racism as a public health crisis. As we know that racism impacts there's systemic racism in everything, especially in the healthcare system. We knew that before COVID-19 and after COVID-19, that showed, how people are being treated, who is getting COVID, this whole thing about social distancing being a privilege thing. So I want to make sure that, that people know that Representative Ruth Richardson brought forward the House resolution to declare racism as a public health crisis, and we passed that off the House floor. And when we come back in 2021, we're going to come back with, you know, budget deficit, and I'm hoping that, you know, that we won't have to cut all the programs that, you know, help our communities and that provide for our communities and are the safety net and provide health and well-being for our communities. But it's going to be a tough year. With that said, that does not mean that we're going to stop fighting. We're still going to continue fighting for our communities, for the Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Minnesota, and for the communities that we represent. We're both, Representative Noor and I are both from the urban core in Minneapolis. So I guess 2021, I'm hoping that it's going to be a better year and there won't be a pandemic and there won't be all the heartaches that we have went through. But please, you know, stay tuned, and no matter what you do, you know, go out, vote, and stay engaged, and, you know, reach to us. Myself, MN Hassan, and Representative Noor are on the line, but there are other Black legislators, Rena Moran, Senator Champion, Senator Hayden, Representative Ruth Richardson, are all, you know, Black legislators who are fighting alongside with us, and we'll continue this fight 2021.
Thank you so much, both Representative Hassan and Representative Noor, for being with us tonight and sharing. What we're going to do now is swing it over back to Amber Jones, our outreach coordinator, and she is going to present more questions that we got from our audience Q&A from Zoom, as well as Facebook attendees.
Thank you, Jasmine. The first question I'm going to share is from Louis Blaze. He's 22, an artist and activist. He submitted this question from Facebook. He said, "Blessings to you all. Thank you for your leadership. I have a question for all the legislators who would like to answer. How do you plan to engage the youth in the decision-making of newly formed policies and laws that will impact our future? There is a slight disconnect with language, procedure, and understanding of the political process. How can we shift this narrative and educate our Black youth on the importance of systemic change? Maybe they'll vote if they knew what and who they were voting for." So Representative Hassan, maybe you want to start this question, then we'll turn it over to Representative Noor.
Sure. So the youth are, they are the most important group that we need to engage. And I know that our youth have never seen themselves as part of this process. That's the reason why they're not engaged, because they don't see that, you know, well, it's the history with politics. No one has ever engaged them. No one has ever included them. No one has made them important enough to invite them to the table and say, hey, this is about your future. This is about your life. What are your thoughts? And I think that this election, more than ever, we need those young people. We need to invite them. And I encourage everyone who's watching right now and everyone who's on this call to reach out to their own circle and engage with them and invite us to those conversations. As you know, legislators would love to come, would love to have those conversations with the young people, to say, you know, to just tell them how this process works and, you know, how this legislation process works, what happens. I'm sorry, I have a baby in the background who is screaming Bloody Mary. But to invite those young kids, young people to say, this is about your future and this is about your life. And we want you to stay engaged, and we want your voice and your ideas to be something, to bring something fruitful to the table. And maybe, you know, you never know, those conversations we could have legislation born out of that conversation. I encourage everybody on this call and everybody who's listening to invite us to those conversations. And I am committed to, engaging in the youth in the communities that I serve and in the district that I serve, just to invite them to the table and say that this is about your future. This is a pivotal election year. We need your voice. We need you to come to the table.
I agree with Representative Hassan. I think it's really important to engage the youth in the political process, in the legislative process. Quite frankly, prior to COVID-19, I've been bringing some young people to the Capitol so that they can understand how the system really works, from creating an idea to becoming legislation, by allowing them to sit in the chamber and participate in the process, creating an experience for them. Unfortunately, that isn't happening because of COVID-19, but also some of the legislation that I just recently have been fighting for. Many young people have been left out of the unemployment because of their attendance of school. Maybe they were the breadwinners and the people who were bringing extra income to pay for the bills. They've been shut out from the unemployment benefit by a law that was drafted in 1939. So those young people have been at the table. They've been with us almost twice now, testifying on a bill that I drafted so that they can really get the help. We didn't get to finish that provision, but I'll bring them back. In fact, it shows them when you have got one person supporting you, you have got other group which are not supporting you for various reasons, that you have to keep on coming back, because it's not one or the other. I know many of us are sick and tired of so many other things, but that means we are making a progress. We are getting exhausted, but we are getting some results and moving forward. Although it may be small, that small incremental changes, we want the youth to lead those change, especially when we're talking about policies. Usually people want something done, but when it comes to the policy initiatives, when it comes to understanding the components that make that policy more effective, there's need for us to develop a leadership program, and hopefully maybe working with the council, we can create a youth leadership program that will help the youth to lead in terms of legislative issues, in terms of understanding policy and lawmaking process. So I look forward to that, and hopefully we can create that during this summer before the next session.
Sounds like a super, super fun idea, Representative Noor. Thank you. Our next question is about the tobacco industry. So the tobacco industry has a long history of targeting African Americans with menthol tobacco products. Moreover, tobacco use leads to more severe symptoms and even death for those who have COVID-19. Would you support legislation to prohibit the sale of these flavored tobacco products in Minnesota? We can start with Representative Noor and then go to Representative Hassan.
One thing I think people need to understand, the targeting that is being done to our community is something that has been ongoing for a long, long time. We know the impact of tobacco on our communities, on young people. It's that addiction. Once you get addicted, it's really hard to really try to cut it off. So the federal law that actually changed to the age limit to 21, it's the same law that I think we adopted in the House of Representatives, and I think it's the law for the land now, that you have to be 21 to really access any tobacco products. We have seen the use of the Juul and so many other things, the process of people trying to walk away from the regular smoking of cigarettes to a different product, which is somehow more harmful than even the original product. So I think we have to be more cognizant. We have to be able to monitor what is happening in our community, especially in our youth. And we also need to deal with the opioid crisis that is impacting our young people across the state. We did some few work in the last year session, and I think we need to keep on working on creating space for our youth to grow and be able to address some of the challenges that they're facing.
Representative Hassan, did you have any comments about tobacco?
The simple answer is yes, I would support a legislation. But I also want to mention that the tobacco industry is big, it's powerful, and fighting them would not be easy. But I think that it's about time. It's time that we, create protective factors for our communities, more like gatekeepers. Our communities have been targeted, whether it's the tobacco industry, whether it's the opioid crisis, whether it's crime, whether it's many other things that our youth are exposed to, and fighting this will not be an easy task. But I hope people can join me and others in addressing these problems and having conversations with our community, whether it's including the youth, because the thing that we have been doing many years is that we're always having conversations about the youth, but we're not having conversation with the youth. A lot of the problems that the youth have, they also have the solutions. So, having those conversations with young people, including in young people, because if they're faced with the problem, trust me, they also know what the solution is. But my simple answer is yes, I would support a legislation that, fights the tobacco companies, which is not going to be an easy fight.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative Hassan and Noor. Our next question was asked earlier on in the program, but this is a conversation that is ongoing in our community. There's been some organizing around it in recent years, but the community would love your take on the topic of reparations. What about a reparations bill for people of African heritage in our state? What are your thoughts about that? Would you support something like that in some form or fashion? So we can start with Representative Hassan and then go with Representative Noor after.
I'm happy to say that the regular session, I carried a legislation that was addressing reparations for African Americans, and it was in the Senate. It was carried by Senator Hayden, and I carried it in the House. Sadly, it didn't get a hearing, and it didn't go anywhere. But I believe that we're way overdue for reparations. I think that knowing that African Americans in this country, gave free labor, everything, they built bridges, they, were working on those farms and the cotton field, and all the people of this country, got rich on using, people from African descent labor for free, and not to mention all the discrimination and systemic oppression and the problems that we're still faced with today, that Black men are gunned down by the police, that the police is trained to use deadly force because supposedly a big Black man is a threat and they're supposed to eliminate a threat at whatever expense. So I am truly a believer that African Americans or people of African descent in this country are due for reparations. And let me be clear, when I say people of African descent, African immigrants do not include in that, because our ancestors did not endure, the trauma, the historic trauma that African Americans endured. So it's a conversation that we need to start having, and it's something that it's a long way overdue.
Thank you, and thank you for that that delineation. I think that's really important in the conversation on reparations. Representative Noor?
I think as Representative Hassan has said, this is long overdue. It has been more than 400 years coming. The descendants of slaves, the African American community, who really helped build this economy based on their free labor. The institutions, including looking into the state's participation in slavery and the benefit that they've had. The bill for reparation needs to happen immediately. It's something that needs to be happening at the federal level and then at the state level, and to ensure that what was taken away for many, many years that has not been given back needs to be restored. And I think it's something that we need to start having the conversation at the state level and push our congressional delegation to ensure that there is a bill moving forward in the Congress.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Noor. So our next question is coming from the audience again. Can you speak to the unrest that is happening in Ethiopia and Somalia that is directly impacting the Oromo community in Minnesota and across the nation? Maybe you can also speak to the recent protests that have been happening here in Minnesota in the past month as well. We'll start again with Representative Noor.
So the killing of Hachalu in Addis Ababa, the brutal murder of Hachalu, it's something that really impacts me. And I think sometimes people have to look into where we are as a society. When we saw Abiy Ahmed, who is somebody who we believed will be the turning point for being an inclusive, in encouraging people to thrive, hasn't done what we expected him to do. The arrest of Minnesotans, starting with Jawara Mohammed, and also many others who are now in jail simply because they wanted to see change, is not something that is acceptable. We're working on sending a strong letter to the congressional delegation. And I apologize, there's so many kids in the home now that we are participating in the process through Zoom. That noise, if you'll excuse me for that. So we will keep on fighting to address the significant issues that are happening in Ethiopia, and to our brothers and sisters. We see you, we hear you, we understand your pain. As someone who has got roots in that area, I think I will continue to advocate, talk to our leadership, send that letter as soon as possible to the State Department to address the issues of injustice, to address the issues of freedom of speech, to address the issues of the brutal murder of Ethiopians, the Oromo communities who are really suffering in the hands of Abiy Ahmed, is something that needs to stop. And I think to restore order and allow the people of Oromia to exist is something I can fight for, and I'll continue to fight for.
I will say that I agree with what Representative Noor has said. What's happening in Ethiopia and the injustice that's being directed towards the Oromo community is wrong. It's inhumane. People simply should not be killed because they speak, against injustice, and that's what's happening. The murder of Hachalu, he was an activist. He was a human rights activist, a singer, a very famous singer, and many people loved him. And he was speaking against what the government was doing, and that's why he was killed, and that's why many people were arrested. People should have the freedom to speak against the government when the government is doing wrong. And what the government of Ethiopia is doing right now is wrong. And the people of the Oromo community should have the right to express their concerns freely without being afraid of retaliation. I support the Oromo struggle. I support the protests that happen in Minnesota. And I think that we need to have more of this. We need to voice this issue more often and more in a different forms. My office is open to my Oromo brothers and sisters in Minnesota. Any way I can help, support, I can amplify their voice, I can stand with them. I'm very open to that idea.
Thank you so much, Representative Hassan and Noor, and we would love to, get more information so that we can echo your support in the statement. I know that you are drafting some statements and things too. We would definitely want to get a hold of that so that we can echo that support. We have 2 minutes left before we close, and if we can get into one last question. So we all know that you all are state representatives, but you all both represent districts in the core of Minneapolis. And obviously the issue of defunding the police is the big thing on the ticket. And even though this is not necessarily your jurisdiction as state representatives, we'd love to hear what the pulse is from your constituents on the issue of defunding police, and then where does your support lie? In 1 minute or less. So, Representative Hassan, you can take this question, and then we'll close out with Representative Noor.
Okay, well, 1 minute is not a whole lot, but I will say this. In my district, there's a lot of support for defunding the police. There's actually more support for abolishing the police, which I am not for. What I am for is funding our education system. I am for funding our housing system. I am for funding our mental health system. I think that throughout the years, we have just, gotten in the habit of pushing all our problems to the police. There is a homeless person sleeping in the street. Let's call the police. There is someone having a mental health crisis. Let's call the police. So I think that what we need to talk about is funding programs that support the existence of our community. And our communities need to get out of the survival mode and thrive and exist and thrive. So I am for that. I think that, I'm not for funding the police more than they are funded right now. And I am not for eliminating the police, but what I am for is funding programs that support our community's safety net, mental health, our education system, our housing system, and to find a way to hold police accountable. That's my take on that issue.
Thank you. Representative Noor, you get the last word of the evening.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And I think this issue of dismantle, abolish, defund the police, it means different things to different people. The safety of our community is paramount. It's really critical. And we need to ensure that our city council, the mayor, and the charter, they're all looking into how to ensure that there's safety on our streets, that we can ensure that we don't just talk about defunding, but what are we going to be doing next? Who's going to be taking the lead in the safety of our community? Who's going to lead on the issues of providing a lawfulness, lawful orders in our cities? So the key point that I will leave is the cities are responsible for the safety, and they're responsible for the police. It's up to the city council to reach out and have conversations with our community. What does this really mean? What does dismantle, defund, and abolish mean? So I'm going to defer that to them, and we'll continue to support our colleagues as they create a space for our communities to thrive, in a space where they don't have to fear the police, that the police are part of the community, that they look like the community that they serve, which Representative Hassan really pushed hard for the residency changes that prohibited Minneapolis from requiring people to live in the city of Minneapolis. So there are many things that we can change, and I think that this is an ongoing conversation that we need to have a detailed, conversation, and this may be a moment that I say more time is needed. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you, Representative Hassan. Thank you, Representative Noor. And thank you to all of our African Heritage legislators from the House and the Senate who joined us this evening or left statements or left warm regards. And thank you to all of the guests who tuned in, whether through Zoom or on Facebook Live, for this conversation that is super, super important. We are going to keep the Facebook Live up after we're finished streaming. So please share this conversation with your networks. Make sure they're involved in what's happening at the Capitol. Even though we are virtual, there's still a lot of work being done, especially in a time like this. So I'm just going to share some brief updates about upcoming work with the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage before turning it over to our Executive Director for closing remarks. So, sorry, gotta clear my throat. So the month of August is going to be very exciting for the council, and I just want to preview some upcoming events. If you are not following us on Facebook already, please follow us on Facebook. I have put the link in the chat function for our Zoom folks. That is where we make sure we're getting all of the information out to the community. We also have a newsletter, and if you go to our website at mn.gov/CMAH, you can subscribe to our weekly bulletin that our great office manager, Shakira Brasher, makes sure goes out every week with a lot of important information. So this information will also be there as well. And we also have a lot of great information about COVID-19 related resources on our website as well. So make sure that you are staying informed, that you're making sure critical information is getting out to your networks. As for the month of August, we just want to share a couple events that are coming up, some recurring events and some specific events for this season. Every month, our council members who are community leaders across the state of African Heritage, they have their monthly full council meeting. It is always on the second Tuesday at 6 p.m. We stream on Facebook. You can also participate in the conversations through public comment. We bring a lot of great guests lately in these past maybe 4 or so months to the space. We've had commissioners from different departments, medical directors. We're really trying to make sure that critical information is getting out to the African Heritage community. So our next council meeting is Tuesday, August 11th, 6 o'clock p.m. Make sure you're tuning in. We will have leaders from the state system continuing to share with us critical information that impacts our lives here in the state. On the third Tuesday of every month, our great host of this event, Jasmine Carey, also hosts a very powerful legislative training. So you want to know how to get involved? We had a question about how we make sure young people get involved. We'll get this important training that Jasmine gives, and she goes very deep into all the language, all of the hoopla of how things happen at the Capitol, everything that you need to know to start getting to know your legislators. That is on the third Tuesday in the evening time. So the next one will be August 18th, and we have that information for you as well. And then also the last thing I want to share is a program that I'll be running through August and September called Conversations with the Council. This is our opportunity to have some critical conversations with African heritage leaders throughout the state about issues that are prevalent in our community, and also what are the solutions we need to take to the Capitol? What are the things we have to go to our legislators and say, you need to do this on behalf of the African heritage people? And so that is going to launch this week. And we're going to have 4 conversations over August and September months. The first will be on education on August 6th. And then on August 20th, it will be public safety. So those will be on Thursday afternoons, 4 to 5:30. So keep an eye out on that information. It will be posted on Facebook. It will be sent in our bulletin. So I just want to thank you so much for your time this evening. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Justin Terrell to close us out for the evening. Justin, it's on you.
I'll be brief. Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Shakira. Thank you, Reggie. We have an amazing staff here at the council. I also want to thank the members of the council who are online tonight. I think I saw Vice Chair Wayne Doe, Secretary Tawana Mullins, and a few other members. I believe Jude Nandi and Carl Crawford tuned in for a little bit as well. I just want to thank everyone who serves the council. Our job, just so the community knows, is a big one. We represent every member of the African heritage community in our state. We get approximately $1.34 for every person. and as you can imagine, with our small staff and our very dedicated council members, covering the full state is a challenge. And so we just need y'all to continue to engage with us and work with us, call upon us. The Capitol is a place that responds as you call upon it. And so we are here for you to call upon, and we are thankful and grateful to serve. I do want to make just a quick comment about transition of leadership at the council. So this is my third and final legislative session debrief, and I'm excited that we've been able to pull 3 of these off, because when I started at the council, we weren't holding events like this for some time. And since I've been here, Day on the Hill, session debrief, and the Fall Policy Summit are all things that I'm very proud of and thankful for the staff who have put that together over the years. And I just want to remind the community that, the council is not the executive director. We have an amazing chairwoman, Narita Hughes, and we have an amazing staff of the folks that I just shouted out previously. Hopefully we can find somebody to come here and take the council to the next level. I just want the community to know that I'm not leaving on any bad terms, that this has been a great experience, and I'm thankful for everyone who has served alongside with me. And I look forward to serving the community in a new capacity going forward. So I don't need to take much time on the transition, but I do want to remind you, the council is not the executive director. The council is made up of so many folks in community, the legislators, the folks who sit on the board, the folks in the office every day, grinding every day to make sure that the wheels on this thing stay on and this vehicle is effective for our people. And so all we're doing is inviting you to get in the car and ride. Just go for a ride with us. Help us make sure that there's always Black folks at the Capitol. Help us make sure that issues, whether there are issues going on in Ethiopia or issues going on in South Minneapolis or going on in the Iron Range, regardless where we have Black folks in the state, we need to rely on each other and call upon the systems that govern our people to better serve us always. And with that, I will conclude my comments. I will thank the legislators for coming out tonight and sharing with the community the hard work you're doing. I know this isn't always the funnest conversation to have, but it's such a necessary one, and it is our responsibility as a people to know how our Black legislators are serving our community. And so thank you to everyone who came out, even for a few of the naysayers. We appreciate being reminded that our people are not monolithic, that we have plenty of diverse opinions amongst our folks. And it's our job to build a bridge to work together to find a way to affirm universal values and make sure our state serves everyone better than it has. Thank you. Have a great night. Shakira, you want to take us home?